He's an expert on the Visionary-Integrator relationship, but he didn't start that way. Today's guest confesses to locking into details, going deep where he shouldn't have, and wearing his people out in the process. That frustration became the fuel for everything that came after. This is Bad Boss Confessional. Hi, I'm Beth Fahey, and this is Bad Boss Confessional, where real leaders get honest about the mistakes that made them better. Before we dive in, a quick thank you to our sponsors for making this show possible. Do you love running on EOS? Try Streti, the EOS platform people love. Native integrations and extra features help you manage people, projects, process, and engagement. Connected to your favorite EOS tools and all in one place. You love EOS. It's time to love the platform you're running it on. Try Streti free at streti.com. That's STRETY.com. Streti, the EOS platform people love. Let's be honest, hiring the right people is hard. That's why I love Titus Talent Strategies. Their whole person hiring approach helps you find and keep A players who align with your values, and they back it with an industry-leading guarantee. Best part? Titus Talent Strategies is included in the entrepreneurial toolkit for companies running on EOS. Check them out at titustalent.com/EOS. Today's guest is someone I deeply respect in the EOS world. Marc C. Winters is an expert EOS implementer, co-author of Rocket Fuel, and author of the brand new book, Visionary. And if there's one thing that drives him, it's cracking the code on the Visionary-Integrator relationship. Today, he's stepping out of his facilitator seat and into the confession booth. Welcome to Bad Boss Confessional, Marc.
Thanks, Beth. Good to be here.
Yeah, it's great to see you.
It's been a minute.
Now, I assume that most of our listeners know who you are, but for those of us that don't know who you are and or who you were before you became an EOS implementer, would you mind just giving us a brief, like 1-minute history of what you did prior to EOS?
Yeah, let me see if I can do that. So I started off in big corporate with a little company called Procter and Gamble. That's where I was when I really caught the entrepreneurial bug. I was actually in graduate school while working at Procter and Gamble, and I was bitten by that bug and really never looked back. And so that led to now we're up to 15 different businesses that I either started myself, bought, and then either had a great result or some terrible failure. And those businesses sort of cut across all different kinds of industries and different sizes and shapes. And at some point, about 15 years ago now, I sort of made the switch from being operator to being more advisor. And one of the first things I did, I had an appreciation for the peer group model from my years in EO Dallas. And so I actually started some Vistage groups and some Vistage groups here in Dallas, started 4 of those. And while I was there, I stumbled across a webinar by our good buddy Mike Payton, where he was talking about EOS. And I'm like, that sounds pretty good to me. That sounds actually better than the system I had used in my businesses. And so I made the pilgrimage to Detroit and met Gino for the first time, and he and I kind of hit it off and became fast friends. And I came back. I started teaching people about EOS. It turns out I was the very first implementer in the state of Texas. At that point in time, there were just a couple of dozen implementers in the world. Of course, now we're like 900 and something. And the next closest implementer to me at that point in time was like Des Moines, Iowa. So it was, there was not a lot of people in this part of the country that had even heard of EOS. So it caught fire. I mean, it took off. My practice, the folks I started talking to about it, really appreciated it. And so I got quickly to a point where it's like, you know what, I don't have time to do this Vistage stuff and this EOS stuff. So I passed off my Vistage groups to somebody else and really focused full time on EOS. And then shortly thereafter, Gino's like, I'm thinking about writing a book. And that led to he and I collaborating on the book Rocket Fuel. And then that sort of took on a life of its own, started a training business off of that. And, here we are about actually 11 years ago since we released Rocket Fuel. So it's been a while.
Now, were you obsessed about the visionary integrator relationship prior to Rocket Fuel? I just, how did you come to this particular topic?
Yeah. So it was something that I had lived. I didn't know. I didn't have a name for it, and I really stumbled into it accidentally. It wasn't something I'm like, I need to build this structure. It was sort of born of the frustration of me not being a very good manager and being a better visionary than I was a manager. And so fortunately, I had somebody that I found that was a good manager, a great manager, and so that was my experience on the front end.
Yeah. I'm just laughing because people are often coming to me and saying, "Well, you must be so good at LMA." And because of great boss workshops and things like that. And I am always like, "Not really, but I know the value."
Yeah, yeah. I used to think I was. I mean, I had at different times. I had lots of people. At one point, I had like 45 people, something like that, that I was managing, and I thought I was pretty good. But then I saw somebody who was good, and it made it clear to me that that was not my gift.
Well, there's gotta be more there, Mark. So it sounds like you have a confession ready to go. What would your confession be from those days?
I'll give you a couple. So one of the businesses that we started from scratch was a high end analytics software company, and so we'd work with retailers and restaurants to help them basically predict how well their concept would perform in a specific location. And so you say, okay, if you put it on this corner, it'll do this much in sales. If you put it on that corner, it'll do, that much. And so they could use that to look at the, whatever the underlying economics of that piece of dirt was to figure out which one was going to give them the better return. And so this business, I was the CEO was what we called it. We had six owners in this company, and all six of them also worked in the business. And so I was in that funny position where my employees are also my bosses in a way, right? And I was one of them. And so I'm kind of walking through that, and being somewhat of a stereotypical visionary, I have this ability to see the big picture and think long term. But along with that, I have this really weird ability to just kind of lock in and zero in on something that is a very much a detailed thing that's right now. And so I get lost in that sometimes. And so that'll show up in strange ways, whether it's in a presentation or a conversation or something where there's some kind of a detail there. If there's a typo on the sheet of paper, I'll spot it. And the problem with that is then I can't let it go. And then my mind just kind of starts spinning, and I can't I can't get back to where I'm supposed to be playing, which is up here, right? And so in managing people, so initially I have basically like six direct reports in that role, and I would just wear them out because I would kind of I'd play up here for a little while, but then I would kind of zoom in and just kind of really get down in the weeds in their business, and the micromanaging thing, and just really drive them insane, which would drive me insane. And it was just this sort of crazy making that would go on, and people would get very frustrated when they see me coming around the corner. And then of course, again, any little thing has me paranoid that there's something else getting missed, or something else going on there that shouldn't be, or something that should be that isn't. And so this is where this integrator role kind of saved me. There was somebody on the team that was just they were sort of that nice balance between being able to talk to me and get what it was that I was trying to articulate on a high level, and translate that then into plans and execution and accountability conversations where they can sit down with somebody and actually get the commitment for the specific thing they need to get the commitment for, and then follow up on it, which was also that's a big weakness of mine. Is in the moment when I'm in the conversation and I'm on it, I'm very much on it, but then I'm not good at coming back to it. And so I would leave that, uh, that untied bow, just kind of laying there, if you will. And so, not really giving those people what they needed, what they wanted. And so, my person that stepped into that seat was great at that. He could have the conversation, he could get it all tied up in a nice package, and then come back and follow up on all the things that he needed to, and just make it a much more enjoyable and productive and effective relationship for all of them. And then in turn, it made my life so much more clear and easy, because now I've got this one person that, it's not that I don't communicate with the rest, I do, but it's a different type of communication now, because I can kind of let go of a lot of the detail, a lot of the minutia, because I know that, that he had it, and really begin to focus back up on that place where we as a company needed me to focus, which is also a place that I enjoy thinking and playing. And so it really got me back into my lane, back into my zone of intrinsic genius, as I call it. And so it was a huge, huge unlock for not just me, but for really everyone on the team.
I love that story. So there's so much there that I think, well, one, we see it in clients to this day, right? This happens especially at the beginning of the EOS journey, because visionaries are trying to figure out where they should be. And this is like in your book, which I love your book. You really address that feeling of being adrift when they do find that person that's actually the integrator that's going to help them. And I want to talk at a much deeper level about that. The other thing that I loved about that story was, I mean, I saw myself in it because I also have the ability to hyper focus. And maybe it's part of ADD, the gifts that we're given as visionaries. I don't really know, but I know that I for sure made people crazy because, I could go way deep on the details. And I see that there's one client with, I'm not going to mention any names, but I have a client in particular who's really struggling with this right now, is, and I'm wondering if you can talk about this concept where visionaries who are founders of organizations, they obviously have great talents for building something that, and they get it off the ground, and it's an amazing thing and the business is growing, but at some point they become the bottleneck for the organization.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So, and it shows up in multiple ways, but one is just, it goes back to this question of trust and control. And we may have talked about it at some point, but when Gino and I were initially writing the book, I went into the project expecting that we would find a pattern where visionaries are control freaks, and we actually didn't find that at all. What we found was that visionaries were very interested in and willing to give things up. They were just very fearful about it. And the reason for that is there's something that's happened in their past, likely multiple times, where they've taken something that's important to them that they started, they built, they put together, whatever, and they hand it to someone and they're like, okay, you take care of this for me. And then they step back a little bit and watch as this person drops it on the floor and it shatters into 1,000 pieces, right? And they're like, what just happened? And so they're scarred by that, and so maybe they try it again and it happens again, and so they have all these scars that sort of build up this shell that makes them want to hang on to stuff, right? And so it's difficult to let go of financial stuff. It's difficult to let go of key client relationships, or the sales process. Sometimes it's there's certain things where it's just really, really hard for them. And it's about trust, and identifying that trust is at the root of it all, and being intentional and focused and doing the work to build that foundation of trust, so that again they can give it a shot. They can let something go, and see that, okay, that worked, that this is a person that I can trust, this is a person that can take this thing from me. And then the pattern that I typically see is it's kind of like building a muscle, and once that they have a round of success, then they have another round of success, and it starts to kind of pick up speed and momentum, and it's kind of like, okay, you can really help me. And they start to really lean into it. Another thing that I'm reminded of, Beth, in your story there about this almost obsessive focus, I think it is related to sort of the ADD thing, because I know I'm like this, and I know a lot of visionaries are like this, where people will look externally and go, "Oh, they can't focus." They're just all over the place. But the reality is, when you land on something that's really interesting, that's really important, that's really captures your attention for whatever reason, then the focus is obsessive. I mean, it's like everything else fades away. You kind of get in that flow state. It can last for hours or weeks or whatever, and it's sort of this deep immersion that happens when you get into that. And so, well placed, that's a superpower. Now, I'll give you an example of a poorly placed one, and it was me. So here's another confessional for you. So at the time, the same company we were talking about before, but early on, small team. We don't have money to hire a lot of people yet, and the early stage company, we need sales, we need to grow. And so we invest in a CRM tool. And so, for whatever reason, this is the thing I became obsessed with. And so, the next thing you know, I'm buried in this thing, and I'm configuring, and I'm trying to figure out workflows and trying to make it do all the things that it can do for us. The reality is, at that point, our sales pipeline could easily be managed on a spreadsheet. The extra gain we're getting out of Marc going crazy in the CRM is nothing. And fortunately, one of my partners, who was much more seasoned veteran than I was at that stage, kind of comes in the office one day. He goes, "Marc, you're missing it. Here's the main thing. The main thing is this: we need you, helping us out there and doing whatever." I'm like, okay. And so that shift in perspective really stuck with me, and helped me avoid falling into that trap. But it's true. Visionaries can get sucked into those black holes. Now, if it's the thing that figures out the unlock in the market, or is some new product that we can offer, that's time probably really well spent. But if it's time, redesigning the phone system, or whatever, it's probably the wrong thing.
Right. And then just getting the visionary to realize what the best and highest use of their time is.
And feel good about it, right?
Right.
So one of the things that we see is they don't, when they're really doing the highest and best use of their time, it doesn't feel like work to them.
Exactly.
So they're like, "Well, I'm not doing anything."
Right.
Well, yeah, you are. You're actually doing the thing that nobody else can do, and it just feels easy to you because that's your wiring. That's what you were built to do. And so there's sort of a transition that has to happen there to get them to accept that and lean into that, and realize that even though it doesn't feel like work, it's actually highly valuable stuff.
Right. Because if they keep going on these deep dives into things, like for me, it was programming the point of sale system at my
There
bakery,
you go.
you
There
know,
you go.
or it was
Perfect.
doing bank reconciliations, Mark. I hate to admit that I
Oh,
had somebody who sat in the finance seat, but oh man, I just love to tie
oh,
that out, you
oh
know?
my goodness.
And
You're a sick person, Beth. You're a sick person.
I know, really. And I mean, like I had and then I would get frustrated. Well, I don't have time to think, or I don't have time to solve this bigger problem. And it was a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Because I was, you know, I would just hyper focus on something that seemed so important at the time. And, I think through EOS, implementing EOS in our business, I started to embrace that. But here's something that's interesting, and you've probably seen this too in your session rooms. When the visionary actually does start embracing what that role is, but the rest of the team doesn't want them to do that. So, for example, I once got feedback as the visionary in the organization during my one thing exercise that I should be more involved in the day to day.
Yeah. So I do see that. So it's interesting. There's a spectrum there, and there's one spectrum is, the team's like, you need to get out of here. You need to go away. You need to leave us alone. You need to whatever. So they're kind of pushing that way. The other one is what you just described, which is they're trying to pull the visionary back in because they miss them, or it's an old habit that they think is missing. Something like that. There's other sort of dysfunctional things that can be driving that, but anyway, you'll see them kind of push or pull, one of those two ways typically. And so I love it Well, first of all, the visionary needs to be engaged, right? They need to be in the level 10s. They need to be in the quarterly planning sessions. They need to be, they can't just leave. They
Right.
have this
They can't
visionary.
abdicate.
Right. And the visionary function, I mean, it's a function. It's not just a label. It's actually it's work. It's stuff that needs to happen. And we need them to carry the torch for that. It's not that other people don't contribute to it, but we really need that visionary to carry the torch. We need them to stay plugged in. They need to be having their same page meetings with their integrator. But if we get into a situation where the team's like, you need to be more involved in the day to day, great. Hang out with them, talk to them, communicate with them. And, the way I'll try to explain it with folks is when we start talking about end runs and going around the integrator, right? And that's a bad thing. But the reason it's bad is because they go around and then they make a decision, or they give direction that is problematic because it doesn't consider all the other work that's taken place and the other plans that are laid out. And so we want communication to flow freely, side to side, top to bottom, all across that accountability chart, so that they're talking to people, they're staying plugged in, they're listening. A lot of times they're learning things that then they can bring back into that same page meeting with their integrator, or maybe back to the level 10 meeting with the leadership team. And the people are getting that feeling of, okay, she's here, she's plugged in, she's listening, she hears me, she's aware of what's going on. So they feel good about that. They feel more confident maybe about that, right? So that's the thing, is be more involved in the day to day, just via presence and communication, not via tampering.
That's right. And I think sometimes what happens is, especially if a visionary does forget, right, that they have to direct traffic. That's what I tell them. It's like, guess what? Now you're directing traffic in your organization because people are going to come up to you and you need to go like this. You need to go talk to this person, or you need to go talk to this person. And that's a kind of a hard concept. And so what I've seen sometimes is it backfires a little bit, where they're like, well, I'm just out. I'm just totally out. You know what? I won't bother you guys. I'm going to go be on my ranch. And if you need something, let me know. And then, no, 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 no. We need we need the visionary there. We need you to help drive the organization. And so I think sometimes what I'm trying to do is coach that visionary and say, look, you have superpowers. You see everything. That's the gift of the visionary. So, what do you see as the big issues for your organization? Take a big step back, get to 30,000 feet. Oh, we don't understand our sales data, for example. Or, that's what visionaries are great at, is seeing that stuff. And that's why we need you in those sessions.
Yep, that's right. They're the best at seeing the pattern and connecting the dots and taking these disparate data points and going, there's a connection here, and being able to pull that together. And I loved, when we were writing Rocket Fuel. One of the early interviews we did was, it was a vision. It was basically telling the story of how they use what we called in Rocket Fuel the question, which is, someone comes to the visionary around the integrator and they ask you, hey, can you tell me what to do here, basically, right? And the question we want you to ask them is, well, are you going to tell the integrator, or am I going to tell the integrator? Because one of us needs to tell the integrator. And if we use that question, truly, we can stop that end run kind of behavior in about 30 days time. It just starts to go away. And this one visionary that we interviewed, he's like, got to talk to Jeff. I mean, that was his thing. Like you said, directing traffic. He goes, okay, I hear you. Got to talk to Jeff. And it wasn't withdrawing from it, right? He's letting them vent, unload, unpack, whatever. But it's always got to talk to Jeff.
Yeah, and again, I think there's a little bit of ego here. There's sometimes they get a little lost, like they don't know what their strengths are. So, how would you, if you were an integrator for a visionary, let's talk to all the integrators that are listening to this podcast. How could you coach an integrator to work with a visionary to get through that difficult transition period?
Well, there's more than one difficult transition period. So it's kind of like you've got some on the front end, but there's going to be more. And so how I would coach them is use the tools, right? So not only the EOS tools, but we've got some specific tools that we developed in Rocket Fuel University to help with this. So one is called the Rocket Fuel Power Index. And it walks through 8 different mindsets. It's a scorecard model. And so, not unlike we might have a quarterly conversation with one of our people. We take this tool and the integrator fills it out and the visionary fills it out independently, given their view of the current state of the relationship, and then they sit down in a same page meeting and walk it through. And it's kind of like, okay, on this mindset, we're seeing it exactly the same. So probably not a lot to talk about there. On this one, wow, you had it really high. I had it really low. What am I missing? What are you missing? What are we seeing differently there? And that's where the juice is. That's where the meat is, right? And so we start to talk about those. And again, it's not unlike a manager and their direct report getting alignment on a people analyzer, right? The visionary and the integrator begin to get alignment on where we are on that power index. So we're getting closer and closer to truly being on the same page. And then we can make decisions from there, which is kind of like, okay, if we're going to make one move this quarter, what's the thing? And we get alignment truly on whatever that next most important, impactful thing is that we can try to make progress on. So that's a big one. And then we also have an integrator report card and now a visionary report card. So they you can use this tool the same way, where on the integrator report card, the integrator fills it out on themselves, the visionary fills it out on themselves. And again, that dives more into the specific details of the integrator role and what it takes to be truly great in that role, but lets them make sure they're seeing it the same way and make sure that the integrator is aware of how their visionary is feeling, what they're seeing. And you need to get that out of their head. You need to know that. If you don't know, where your visionary is at, then how can you possibly be their complementary puzzle piece, as we describe it, right? So you got to do, as the integrator, you got to do that work. And of course, now with the visionary book, we've created this visionary report card. And I gave it while we were at a conference in Kansas City. I did a talk for the Integrator Mastery Forum one of the days leading up to the conference. And so I took that content, the 10 pillars that we created for the visionaries, and I tried to translate that for those integrators. So here's what your visionary is trying to do. Here's how you can help them, right? And so as an example, one of the pillars for the visionaries is support your integrator. So, in public, don't be, belittling them, criticizing them. Let's have all that stuff kind of behind the scenes in our same page meetings. Help them find an early win. There's so many things that you can do as the visionary to support your integrator truly and help increase their odds of success. So the integrator side of that is be easy to support. Don't be difficult to support. Do your work, right? Do your ask the questions, try to get the understanding that you need, follow through on your commitments. When you say something, do it. Show results. I mean, if you do things, it makes it easy for your visionary to support you. That whole cycle starts to spin in a positive way. So there's the whole list. That's where the visionary book for integrators is a helpful peek inside the brain of the person they're trying to support.
I bought these for all my teams, and I'm giving one to the visionary and one to the integrator right
Oh,
now.
you're the best. Love you,
Well,
Beth.
because and when okay, so I have a team that we have a we have a flaming visionary.
I've
And
seen.
so I've we that's and I speak of which I am, right? So anyway, I'm feeling sorry for the team, and because they're looking at me giving this to the integrator, and I said, "Would you guys like a copy too?" And they said yes. and, and the visionary's looking at me, and I said, "They're gonna crack the code on you, man." It's
I
like,
love it. I
get
love it.
ready, get ready.
I love it.
But it is such a great book, and those tools are great.
So,
So
so actually, let me speak to something there. So
yeah,
there's, one of the other pillars for the visionary is to surround yourself. Okay. And so there's 7 different, I describe it as a shield wall, and imagine these different posts in the wall that are defending you. And one of those posts is the leadership team collectively, the leadership team. And the challenge that I put to the visionary is, picture in your mind's eye your leadership team, see their faces, sitting around the table, and then ask yourself, do you truly have a rock star in every single one of those seats? Because if you don't, that whole leadership team is being dragged down. They can only run as fast as the slowest horse on that team. And so if we've got somebody, and I know you see it as an implementer, a lot of times we're sitting there in the room and it's pretty obvious, this one over here or that one over there, they're just not running as fast as the rest of them. And, eventually they figure it out, but that's lost opportunity, lost time when they can't either change the game and raise their own level, or somebody doesn't have the hard conversation, make the hard decision to make a change there.
I think sometimes what has happened that I've seen happen, and when I'm doing my check-in calls with my visionaries, I'm asking, are you seeing what I'm seeing and things like that in the session room, and they see everything. I think that sometimes what the issue is that they feel that as the visionary, they must be the smartest person in the room. And what I find myself doing coaching wise is saying, for a while, yeah, that feels good, but at some point that's exhausting and you can't keep up with that. And then you become the reason that the company is hitting the ceiling because you only have so much capacity. And when you get to that place where you're looking around the room and you realize everybody on your team is smarter than you and you're okay with that, is when your company actually takes off.
Yeah, 100%. And back to, you talked about the bottleneck situation before. That's another great example of how the visionary bottleneck happens, is when they, uh, you know, have to be the genius with 1,000 helpers, right? And some people, their ego kind of leads them down that path, but it's very limiting. The challenge to the leaders in that room is, be great, be the expert in your function. You should be the one that's telling us what to do. We shouldn't be the one that's telling you what to do, and certainly not the one that are making all your decisions for you. So yeah, that's a very powerful unlock or lever, if we can lean into that.
And I think that, for visionaries, so much of the work is done in here and in here through this process
Mm,
where it's, I mean, everybody on the leadership team, as we work with them, is changing fundamentally inside, right? I, I'll say this is an inside job, EOS. It's a system, but you're actually changing how you think. You're changing, like you're rewiring a lot of stuff. And one of the things that I find happens is that the visionaries that get over the hump of, whatever their limiting beliefs are that are causing the dysfunction in the first place, when they do the deep work internally to figure out what's driving them, that's when I see like big changes on teams. Do you see the same thing?
I do, and in fact, that's why the 10 pillars for visionaries. Pillar one is know thyself, because so often the visionary has spent no time on that, and so they're on the train charging down the track, and that, if they don't understand what's going on within themselves, they don't understand truly what they need, they don't understand what they want, and so they put themselves at high risk of ending up in this place I call a hollow exit, right? Which, imagine that, you've made all the sacrifices, you've done all the stuff for your business, and you've gotten down the road, and you have some kind of a big exit event, and so you get a payday, and now it's like, okay, now who am I? And now their identity is floating off. They don't have a good way to identify themselves anymore. And then, how about my spouse? Oh yeah, she left. And well, I got my kids. Well, no, my kids hate me. And so they're at this point, in their life where it's like, yeah, I sacrificed everything for this, and it's so sad, and it's unnecessary, and so the sooner we can get a visionary to kind of do that work that really helps them get clear, then the business is just, it's something that's serving now a higher, longer term purpose for them individually. And of course the business has its own why, it has its own purpose that's bigger than the visionary and should last a lot longer than the visionary does, right? But once they get clear on that, it's like, now all the pieces can kind of start to fall in place, and they can quit moving around so much, because the moving around a lot of times is because they're confused. They're not clear. And so we got to get them that clarity so they can truly get focused on the right stuff. And then that's what helps it all unlock. So I 100% see what you see there.
Yeah. And it's just such a gratifying thing as an implementer to see people make these huge transitions, right? I think that's my that's my ultimate goal is like I certainly want to teach people EOS because it's a great system. It's going to get you the results that you want. But what it does for individuals on the team is really what I'm after
Yeah.
because you get one shot, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
How great is it when somebody comes in on the front end and they're, whether they're saying it out loud, you can kind of see that they're kind of like, man, I want to get this thing ready to sell so I can get out of here. And they're just trying to kind of clean it up. And then you go through the process and it all kind of starts to fall in place and it starts to feel different. And now they're having fun and they're like, well, I can do this forever, and it's a whole different thing. And, they may still end up, selling or doing something, but not because they have to or because they're running away from it. So it completely changes the game.
it's a great system. It's amazing. I mean, obviously, we're huge fans
Yeah.
of it, but it is, y it's so much more than just a business operating system, right? Well, Mark, thanks so much for your confession because I think everyone could see themselves in your confession there, and the work that you've done, the inner work that you've done that obviously led to producing things like this book and, rocket fuel and things that have helped people so much. I do always ask my guests one question though at the end. And that question is, if you were to get a tattoo somewhere on your body that either signified something that was very important to you or something that was related to the story in some way, what would your tattoo be and where would you get it?
Well, so it would be a word and the word would be freedom. And so where I would get it, you mean the tattoo parlor or do you mean the body part?
The body part.
The tattoo parlor might be easier. The body part, let's see. I think I would go, boy, that's a hard one for me. I would probably go inside of my upper arm on the left side. So it would be close to my heart,
Mhm.
and I could show it to somebody, but it's not in their face.
Yeah, that's how us Gen Xers respond to that question more often than not. It's like, it's just for me."
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Do you wanna provide any color on that?
Well, so it goes back to uh, really the heart of my passion, and so I love visionary entrepreneurs, and everything I'm doing is trying to help them avoid like that hollow exit we talked about, avoid another one which I call the pit, which is where an entrepreneur wakes up about 18 to 24 months into their business and they're making $1.50 an hour basically for all they're hating what they do, they feel stuck and trapped, and sadly a lot of them never get out of that pit. And so, what you do and the implementer community does to help entrepreneurs rise out of that is an important thing. I had a trip with my wife, who's also named Beth, about 12 years ago now, and we're hiking. And we were having the debate around, would you rather be rich or would you rather be king? Which is sort of a classic entrepreneurial debate, right? And I'd had that conversation a dozen times. At that point, I'd probably answered it both ways multiple times, just depending on where my head was whenever I was asked the question. On that day, for whatever reason, the answer that came to me was, well, it depends. It depends on which one of those is going to increase the odds of me getting more of the freedom that I want. And then after the words came out of my mouth, I sort of had this conversation going on in my head, which was kind of like, well, that's odd. How would I describe the freedom that I want? And so it led me down a path to start thinking about how to structure that, which led to a research project. So here's another example of a visionary kind of doing a deep dive. And so I studied all the people and all the lists of all the gurus and whatever, and of life areas and all that, and basically clustered them. And turns out there are 9 domains of freedom. And so this is the what I call the exponential freedom model. And your description of what you truly want in each of those areas is different than mine, is different than my wife's. Everybody's is totally unique. It's like a fingerprint, right? But if we can get clear on what we want there in the future, so what does our future self want? So when Mark's 75 years old, what do I want each of those 9 areas to look like? Then I can draw a line back to today and I can focus in tangible ways on the things that are levers in each of those areas that can help increase the odds that I'm going to get it. So that's how it all comes together for me. So if I can do that for what I call driven and visionary entrepreneurs, Dave, driven and visionary entrepreneurs, then my life is hopefully worthwhile.
That's so great. Well, thanks for sharing that. That was I asked for a little color, and that was really a lot of color, and so great to hear from you. All right, last question. Is there an integrator book coming?
So there is. So I have two books in the pipeline. One is the integrator book, where we'll take basically the 10 pillars that I did for visionaries. We'll do a 10 pillars for integrators. So here's the 10 areas of integrator greatness, if you will, and help them have a path like we described. And then the other book coming along behind that, the next year, will be this exponential freedom book that somehow we ended up talking about.
Yeah. Well, I can't wait for both. And thanks so much for being on today's podcast and
Oh, my
really
pleasure.
for what you do for the community. It's so huge.
Well, I feel the same way about you, Beth, and you make a huge difference in the world every day with with your clients and your work around the great boss and all of that. So super happy to get to spend a few minutes with you.
Thanks to Mark for reminding us that even the most visionary thinkers need someone to help bring it all to earth, and that knowing when to let go is one of the greatest leadership lessons of all. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like, subscribe, and share with friends who need to hear this. Thanks for listening to Bad Boss Confessional. We'll see you again next week.